Welcome. This is the video series, The One and Only Nation, Written in the Stars, and this is our second video in this series. We've entitled Part 2, Discovering the Nation, Written in the Stars. And truly, this is a profound thing, for there to be a nation actually written in the stars. There's a few things we've gone over in the first video that I want to bring forward because these things directly touch on where we're at on this second video. But I encourage everyone to listen to the first video because it will really make all of this more meaningful. Here's some things that we just want to list from the previous video to take us forward now into today's material. The Creator gave mankind the Mazzaroth. It's a gift from Him for mankind, the great timepiece in the sky. And the Mazzaroth was created as a perfect clock that kept perfect time. And we didn't even mention the moon, which also was created in a way to keep perfect time along with the Mazzaroth. However, due to sin, that clock is now slowing down and is out of sync. But it's close enough for us to understand how it works and that it was perfect at one time. We learned that the Creator gave names to the 12 signs of the Mazzaroth to identify the months. And He's the one that created the signs and that He named the signs. And that's really our interest in this particular video. We want to know about these signs and what do they truly identify? They are a memorial of something. What is that? And can we determine that? Those 12 signs, literally written out in the stars by the hand of God, before the world ever began, are a memorial of the one and only nation of divine destiny that is central to the Creator's great plan. This is why these signs are actually written in heaven, because this nation is so significant that the Creator wrote this into the stars for all time, not just for a given point of time in history. That makes this nation that we're talking about the most significant nation that has ever existed or will exist. This is very profound, and this is why this is important to us. So now we get to that question, what is a nation? Well, we all know what a nation is, right? As this particular slide points out, it's a group of people who share certain similarities. Language, history, identity. And it involves a political unit with a well-defined area of territory where there's a government that has authority over the people within that territory. Well, that's the accepted meaning of a nation today. What you might not know is that definition of a nation is not the original definition of a nation. And it's not the Bible definition of a nation. When you read the word nation in the Bible, that's not referring to the same thing as you use in secular speech when you say nation today. So what really is a nation in biblical terms? Well, you can look this word up. You will find that it's from Latin and Old French. The word in French is from about 1300. The word is nation, and it has the same meaning as it had earlier in the Latin. It means a race of people, a large group of people with common ancestry. So a nation actually descends from a common ancestor. A nation, in its original sense, is like a really big family, a really big self-governing family. So when did the definition of a nation change? Well, in the English language, this political sense of nation, as we use it today, actually began to emerge about 500 years ago. And since then, it has predominated, and people have kind of lost the old sense of the word nation, although you still do find it, for instance, in the Native American nations in America. These are groups of people who do share this common ancestry. They are nations in the original sense. Sometimes they're called First Nations. These kinds of nations really match more the biblical definition of what a nation is. Let's look at Genesis chapter 10. This is where it's very clear what a nation is in the scriptures. In Genesis chapter 10, as you read this context, you're reading what is called in the scriptures, or by scriptural scholars and so on, the table of nations, because it actually lays out where all of the nations of the world come from, the original 70 nations of the world. And what you find when you look in Genesis 10 is a nation is a group of people descended from a common ancestor, having an allotment of land from the Creator in which to dwell together as a big family. You see, that was his plan. He was wanting to give nations of people allotments of land for them to live in. And they could grow in those places, and those places were especially for each of these nations. This is what you find in Genesis chapter 10. For example, Genesis 10:5 says this. Now it's speaking about the ancestors first, and it says, "From these, the coastlands of the nations were separated into their lands." Separated by whom? Well, what it's assuming here is that the Creator separated them into their lands. What made them their lands? The lands were given to them by their Creator. It says, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. So this is what a nation was originally, and there were 70 of them like this, separated into their own lands, family groups descended from a common ancestor. Genesis 10:32 sums this up. It says, "These are the families of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies by their nations. And out of these, the nations were separated on the earth after the flood." So this is what a nation is in the scriptures. It's a group of people descended from a common ancestor with an allotment of land from the Creator in which to dwell as a big family, governed as a big family. That's a nation. So where did this other idea of a nation come from? In a word, empire building. Empires disregarded these allotments of land that the Creator had given to the 70 nations. When you're an empire builder, what you do is you violate all of those borders, and you're trying to create a bigger system that then amalgamates into the bigger system, into the empire, all of these indigenous nations of people. And of course, what you want to do if you're an empire builder is you want to change the loyalties of those people that you conquer away from their indigenous nation and to the empire. So it's only natural that in empire speak, a nation no longer involves being part of a certain nation in terms of family heritage and genealogy. So that was dropped out of the meaning so that it could facilitate everybody being part of a big empire. And that's why we have the word nation the way we do today. And what you find really as you look in classical literature and all kinds of different literature, empires look at indigenous nations as savages, as subpar, and people to be conquered. That's really the history of the world. That's the history of the word nation. So when I say that the stars actually reveal a nation, am I talking about this newer version of the word nation that's really talking about empires? Or am I talking about the original word nation? Well, since it's the Creator that gave us the Bible, Genesis 10, and his plan of putting people into a certain allotment of land, separating people according to their families, that's his plan. Isn't that the kind of nation then you would expect him to be actually showing us in the stars? Not this more modern sense of the word nation. So I think that's important to help us identify this nation of destiny. It's not an empire type nation. We would expect the nation written in the stars to be a nation according to the Bible definition of a nation, not man's definition. As we go along, we'll see if that proves true, and you will find that it does prove true. Well, now let us consider the word zodiac, because the Mazzaroth in the scriptures is actually identified today by the common word zodiac. What does that actually mean, and is that scary? Well, for some of us, it's kind of scary to even think about talking about the zodiac, because people often associate the word zodiac exclusively with astrology. They just think this is some kind of astrology when you use the word. But when you understand that it was Yahweh that created the Mazzaroth, and then it kind of morphed in the minds of man into the zodiac. It's the remnants of the Mazzaroth that we find in the zodiac. And the zodiac is not just used for astrology, but it's used in astronomy and has been for a very long time, completely apart from astrology. It's defined by the annual path of the sun across the sky. That's what astronomers are looking at, and they identify the location of certain stars and celestial events through locating them using the zodiac. In other words, they recognize these signs, but they don't use them for astrology. They actually use them for astronomy, the science, really, of the stars. Interestingly, here's an illustration of this. Some people assume that dates in a horoscope correspond to when the sun passes through each constellation. They don't really, because astrology and astronomy are different systems. Actually, horoscopes aren't even referencing the current zodiac that's in the sky. They have a system that's apart from that. In fact, horoscopes, being a system of divination, do not in any way correspond to modern astronomy. Astronomers reference the signs of the zodiac for purposes completely unrelated to astrology, and we can do the same. I think this is important to realize, that the zodiac has purposes apart from astrology, just, of course, as the Mazzaroth did. It has purposes apart from astrology. And these are the same signs, this is the same setup that we have in what we call the zodiac today as the original Mazzaroth. The only difference is because the heavens have slowed down, positioning is different today than it was when it was created. So when we're looking at this, just like astronomers, we're not interested in astrology. What we're interested in when we look at the zodiac is the signs themselves. Since we know that Yahweh named the constellations originally, these ancient signs in the zodiac still preserve, though sometimes imperfectly, an essence of those original names that Yahweh gave to these individual signs as to what they are. And that's what we're interested in, is the signs themselves that are actually mentioned in Genesis, the first chapter, that Yahweh put there that he named. Those signs still there? Well, he created the stars, so yeah, they're still there. Can they still be recognized as what they originally were called? That is the question. And if so, what do they identify? These are some of the things that we're interested in. Here's an interesting representation of the zodiac, of 4 signs, principal signs of the zodiac. As we look at this, we see these signs opposite one another around the zodiac. We start with Leo in our presentation here, a lion. We go to Taurus, a bull or an ox. We go to Aquarius, a man pouring out water. And last of all, we go to Scorpio. Now, as we get into this, the word Scorpio is talking about a scorpion, right? But there's more to this particular sign, so you see some other things here. And we will discuss this as we go along. And it's interesting when we look at these 4 signs of the zodiac or the Mazzaroth, that these 4 signs, as well as the positions of the zodiac they are in, match the 4 beings or angels of the presence that we find in Scripture. And I think this is profoundly interesting. Reading from Revelation 4, 6 through 7, it says, "In heaven, around the throne were 4 living beings covered with eyes in front and behind. The first living being was like a lion. The second living being was like an ox. The third living being had a face like a man. And the fourth living being was like a flying eagle." So this is kind of amazing when we look at this, that in this vision of heaven, we see these very signs in these living beings around the throne of God that we see as we look at the Mazzaroth and the Mazzaroth signs. This is an indication to us that these Mazzaroth signs and these beings have a common plan from the Creator. This didn't arise from the Babylonians. This did not arise from the Sumerians or the Egyptians. We're looking at something that's very old here that actually followed a pattern, a heavenly pattern in the Mazzaroth. That's very profound, isn't it? And we look at the order of the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle in the Mazzaroth is interesting to us for another reason. And that is that it disregards the movement of the sun. You see, we're starting with Leo here. You notice when we read in Revelation, it's the lion that was first. We're starting with Leo as being first, the lion, and then going around the Mazzaroth from there, moving clockwise. However, the movement of the sun in the Mazzaroth is counterclockwise, and that determines actually the way astrology works, the way horoscopes work. And the fact that as we look at the Mazzaroth and these signs of the Mazzaroth, that they actually go in clockwise order, what we're seeing is that the biblical order that we find is disregarding astrology and how astrology works. It's not using the methods of astrology. even though these signs are in the zodiac. And I'm just explaining this kind of in detail because whenever you talk about the Mazzaroth, there are always people that are saying, well, that's astrology. And that's actually simple-minded. I mean, if it were astrology, if we're doing horoscopes and stuff like this, it would be evil. But what we're looking at here is a creation of God from before man was in the earth. And we're finding this correspondence in the Mazzaroth, today known as the zodiac, with these beings in the Bible. Clearly, that's something of divine origin. What this is actually explaining as we go through there in Revelation is that the lion, the ox, the man, the eagle, these are the four angels of the presence, and they're actually named, listed by name in Enoch chapter 9. The lion is Michael, the archangel, the leading angel. Uriel is next, represented by the ox. Raphael is next, represented by the man. And finally, we have Gabriel, represented by the flying eagle. And this is the layout that's given in Scripture of what we might call the camp of heaven. And each of these angels of the presence are actually archangels. Archangels mean they're the leader. These are actually division leaders. And what you're seeing then is the layout of the camp of heaven around the throne of God in heaven. So each of these leaders in heaven is actually representing a whole division of angels, innumerable angels in each side around the throne of heaven. It's really quite an amazing vision when you think about it. These are the leaders of those angels under their charge in their particular position. And as you can see, they're laid out according to the four cardinal directions of the compass. Now, this is an amazing picture, and when you realize that the angels in heaven follow the same pattern as the Mazzaroth, it becomes easier to understand how this Mazzaroth system became perverted by pagans to actually worship the stars. But Yahweh didn't create it like this for people to worship these signs. They're signs because they're monuments. They are representative of something that is something permanent from Him for mankind. As long as these stars are there, they are representing this. Now, here's an amazing thing, and that is we're talking now about a nation. We're talking about the nation of Israel as you find it in the Bible. We're not talking just about the Jews, although they're included under Judah. Judah is one of the tribes, but it's also a division leader. That's not all of Israel. As you can see, even among these division leaders, you still have Joseph, Reuben, and Dan besides Judah. So we're talking about the whole nation of Israel, including its tribes here. This is an original kind of nation that we talked about earlier, descended from a common ancestor. And this nation still exists. It still exists, even though much of this nation is veiled. This nation is a unique nation in all of the world. As you see here, the order of Israel resembles the order of the angels in heaven. This is really pretty amazing. It's a reflection of, it follows the pattern of heaven. Hebrews 8:5 talks about this. It says, a copy and shadow of the heavenly things, even as Moses warned by Elohim. See, you shall make everything according to the pattern that was shown to you on the mountain. Israel is unique among all nations because it's arranged according to a pattern that reflects heaven. So this is really a very profound thing. And the modern mind doesn't enter into this very easily because we don't understand this kind of a nation very well in modern times. But it's worth looking into and understanding because obviously our Creator is trying to show us something here, having this monument in the sky to this 12-tribe nation called Israel. And since these commanding tribes of Israel match up with these signs of the zodiac or the Mazzaroth, what about the other signs? Are those going to match up with the rest of the tribes of Israel? There's 8 more. Are they going to measure up? And as we look at this, are they going to be in the correct divisions? What kind of order will this be? Well, there are people that have tried to do this in the past. You can find books about this and so on. And the general way that they do it is they try to put these tribes in birth order. And they start usually with Aries because Aries is the first sign in astrology. And then they follow the pattern of astrology. I've already said we're not doing astrology. And I've already shown you that the pattern that the scripture uses is different than astrology, moving clockwise around the Mazzaroth, starting with Judah, the lion. So that's the pattern we're going to look at. And we're going to look to find the other tribes in each of these 4 divisions of Israel. We've already done quite a bit of work on this. We did a series on the remnant tribes of Israel that featured the breastplate. And for the first time, we put these in the right order. It's not just obvious birth order that normally is used. There's a given order. Now, I'm not going to explain that all over again here. If you want to understand this order and why it is in this order, you need to look at this video or series of videos that explains all of this order. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for these divisions that show up on the breastplate. We want to see if this is what you find in the Mazzaroth representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Some things we learned when we went through this is that this breastplate, as you see it here, it manifests the order of the remnant tribes of Israel in the last days, that is, during our time. And each division is created to perform its own mission within the whole overarching mission of the remnant nation. After all, if this nation is written in the stars, don't you think the Creator has a mission for this nation? Individual tribes each have unique gifts to bring to the respective mission of their own division. Israel is defined as an army. It moves in an organized kind of way. That's what you see on the breastplate. That's the way it's organized in the Mazzaroth. As we examine the signs of the Mazzaroth, we want to see if all of these tribes are there and if they retain this division order as revealed in the breastplate. So we're going to be drawing on this breastplate quite a bit and the things we've already learned there. And of course, I'm not going to have time now to re-explain everything I already talked about when I taught the breastplate that will teach you about the tribes. For that, you're going to need to look at this earlier seminar, and you have the web address on the screen. You can sign up at the website free of charge and view the Remnant Tribes of Israel seminar. And seeing that in relation to what we're doing right now with the Mazzaroth is going to be great benefit to you in understanding the importance of the remnant nation of Israel in all of its tribes and Yahweh's purpose for that. Clearly, this is written in the stars for a reason. And many people are missing what this is about, and you have the opportunity to know and understand it. So take that opportunity. So here we have a representation of the Mazzaroth. And as we look at this, we notice we have the first tribe there labeled as Judah. And in Numbers chapter 10, it tells us about Judah. First, the standard of the camp of the sons of Judah went forward according to their armies. This is talking about Judah leading the division. It's division. And Judah must be like lions because they are the shock troops who must close with and fight the enemy first. They need to see the enemy first. They need to respond to the enemy first. And that's what Judah is about. Genesis 49:8 says of Judah, Judah, your hand will be on the neck of your enemy. And I should mention that even in modern times, when we look at the state of Israel and today a Jewish nation, not the same as biblical Israel, in that biblical Israel is larger, including all of the tribes, but certainly part of biblical Israel. Look at the wars that have been fought by Judah in modern times. Surely they reflect this aspect of Judah that we see in the scriptures, having their hand on the neck of their enemies. That's exactly what they do. They have defeated far larger foes than themselves. I'm thinking, for example, the Six-Day War, which is truly amazing, was meant to wipe them out, and yet they had an amazing victory. This is really a hallmark of Judah. And of course, what about the Messiah? The Messiah who is the Lion of the tribe of Judah, our true leader, the true leader of Israel, who goes out before us with a heart of justice, a heart of courage, a heart of love for his nation, who is willing to give everything for us. So Judah rightfully goes out first, and is in this first position that originally came up in the spring. That's where it was in the Mazzaroth. The Mazzaroth has drifted since then, but as you look in the book of Numbers, Judah was on the east, was the first. The year begins in the spring, and so all of this coincides in this way. Here's the sign of Leo as we see it in the Mazzaroth/Zodiac. You can see the stars. Even looking at these particular stars, they do look like a lion, a crouched lion. It's really interesting. But Leo is a lion. This is the sign of Judah. Genesis 49:9 again speaks of Judah as a lion. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rise him up? That's Judah. Just falls that way. The next tribe that is listed in Numbers in Judah's division is the tribe of Zebulun. And the scripture says, of Zebulun, Moses said, rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out, and Issachar in your tents. Very interesting when you read about Zebulun, it always seems to include Issachar. These prophecies, Zebulun and Issachar are together. They're two brothers. The original ancestors of these tribes were sons of Jacob, who was later named Israel. This was really the origin of the nation of Israel. And Zebulun and Issachar were brothers very close together. So you see them represented this way, very much in some kind of relationship together, always mentioned together like this. So what is the deal with Zebulun? Well, Zebulun is very interesting because Zebulun is represented by the sign that today we call Cancer, which is a crab. In other words, a creature that dwells by the sea. And you can see here the sign of Cancer. Doesn't it look like the bow of a ship? That's what it represented in ancient times. Argo, the ship constellation. And Polaris is in this sign, and it's long been the principal navigation star. So this particular sign very naturally falls as a seafaring sign. That's what this is about. Zebulun was located in an area of Israel where they were seafarers, and as you can see here from Matthew chapter 4, this is an area where Yeshua, the Messiah, went and healed people and taught about the kingdom there, blessed people there. As we look at this some more, we notice that the gem in the breastplate corresponds very, very well with all of this information, being sort of a light green color, very much like the Mediterranean Sea, very much representing water. All of this goes together to identify Zebulun very well. The scripture says, Zebulun will dwell at the haven of the sea. He will be for a haven of ships. His border will be on Sidon. So we have this laid out here now. We have Judah and Zebulun. Now we're moving on to Issachar, the third tribe in this division. Each of these divisions is a division of 3 tribes. And now we want to see Issachar. Well, Deuteronomy 33 says, Rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out. They will draw out the abundance of the seas. So as we've seen, Zebulun is very much a seafaring tribe, and that means they're very much involved in commerce. But Zebulun and Issachar are shown together in this particular sign of the zodiac, today named Gemini, the brothers or the twins. That's who they are, and we see this representation of them. And it's interesting how they work together. The scripture says of Issachar, Issachar is a strong donkey. And Deuteronomy 33, Rejoice, Issachar, in your tents, talks about the hidden treasures of the sand. So here's how this worked. These 2 tribes work together. Zebulun brought in this wealth through being a seafaring tribe, trading in the Mediterranean Sea, and bringing in this wealth into the nation. And then Issachar was like a strong donkey, as you see here, a caravan of donkeys. And in ancient times, donkeys were used in this way to transport goods. So this is really the role that Issachar had, transporting the goods. So you see how Zebulun and Issachar work closely together. That's what you see in the sign Gemini, even though Gemini is standing for Issachar, but it's involving this close relationship because this was so much a part of Issachar, is their relationship with Zebulun, the 2 together. And Deuteronomy 33 says, Rejoice, Issachar, in your tents, the hidden treasures of the sand. So in other words, the treasures they would receive through transporting the goods that they would then get from Zebulun. A wonderful partnership going on between these 2 tribes of Israel. And you notice how it just falls together here. It's just there. These are the signs that are there. So now we have the complete division, Judah, Zebulun, Issachar, and we have some additional information about these tribes. We have 1 Chronicles chapter 12 that mentions both Issachar and Zebulun. It says of Issachar that they were men who understood the times to know what Israel ought to do. And it mentions about Zebulun that they're able to go out in the army and they could set the battle in array. In other words, they're very organized. They had organizational skills in the army. And it also says about them who could keep ranks and were not of double heart. Commitment. This is a tribe of great commitment. And of course, it mentions them together here once again, right? Because in a way, they share these same features being so close together. Basically, this boils down to vision and loyalty and knowing what to do. And this is what you would want with this first division, because these are the tribes that draw in close with Judah in this division, where Judah goes out first. You know, when you go out first, you're a pioneer. Other people don't see what you're doing, so you don't get all the support you need. You really need these tribes in order to have that support if you're Judah. So if we kind of boil down the pictures we see in Scripture, that we see in the Mazzaroth even, the support comes from Zebulun and Issachar. Not that other tribes can't do it too, but these guys, they know the times. They know what's going on. They know what to do. They're highly organized. They jump in with Judah and provide supplies, provide support, provide labor in order to get the mission done. So this is a perfect first division of the nation of Israel to get things moving on behalf of the nation. And I think as we've seen, as we've looked at the Mazzaroth, the breastplate order is the same order that we found in the Mazzaroth. The two perfectly go together. Now, did we have to stretch anything here to make this work? I mean, you can see it just falls into the right order. It looks so easy, you might not realize nobody's ever done this before. The reason it looks easy is because we got the breastplate right in the first place. That's what makes it easy. That's why you need to look at those videos too. So let's now go to the second division, the Joseph-Ephraim division of the tribes of Israel. We're moving on now, and we notice, of course, that division is headed up by Joseph/Ephraim. Now, the reason we're representing it that way is because Joseph was the original son of Jacob, Israel. And however, Joseph had two sons, and one of them was Ephraim, the other was Manasseh. Ephraim, though, was the leader, and so carried on the same position, if you will, as Joseph. So the ox sometimes pictures Joseph, but it just as much pictures Ephraim. We have Deuteronomy 33, and it says this. Now, this is Moses speaking. About Joseph, he said, his horns are the horns of the wild ox. With them, he will push all the peoples to the ends of the earth. They are the 10,000s of Ephraim. They are the thousands of Manasseh. So far as Joseph is concerned, these horns, these two horns, are like the two sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. Here's the sign you find in the Mazzaroth/Zodiac. This is the next sign, Taurus, the bull, or the ox. Just lays that way, friends. That's how it is. And you can see why this is seen as a bull with what looks like these huge horns in this particular sign. So again, this just matches up perfectly. We're showing here too the stone from the breastplate that also represents Joseph/Ephraim. And this particular stone is quite amazing because it looks actually like a burning coal. And of course, that represents what happens on a farm, right? Coal is used to power a lot of things on the farm in ancient times, and also to like make metal, things like this. Things associated very closely with an ox actually being used in a very similar way, very utilitarian. And so all of this matches up very well. So here is Joseph, and we have Joseph in place, Ephraim in place. We notice that the next sign we're looking at is the sign of Benjamin. Now, we have that represented here as a wolf. Here's the actual sign. It's not a wolf, is it? It's not a wolf. The scripture says Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he'll devour the prey. At evening, he will divide the plunder. I think it is interesting they have a bee in this picture. because Benjamin is also associated with honey, and the breastplate gem looks a lot like honey. But talking about the ram in the picture, this is Aries, by the way, associated with the ram. People have seen this. This is how it's associated today. But doing some research on this, I found out that the ram is not the original sign of Aries. At universetoday.com, it has some information on this. It says, in Babylon, Aries was known as the hired man. The shift in identification from the constellation to the ram likely occurred in later Babylonian tradition because of its growing association with Dumuzi, the shepherd. By the time the Mul-Apin was created, 1000 BCE, modern Aries was identified with both Dumuzi's ram and a hired laborer. So in other words, this particular sign is not the original sign. And it goes back to another sign or explanation for this sign as the hired man before the ram. But we don't know if there's something else before that. And so really, this particular sign is not so certain like all the others that we've seen. So we went through 4 that match up perfectly with the tribes. We have this one, and because of changing mythology, this sign apparently was changed at least once and maybe more. So let's go back to the first sign that's known about, and that is the hired man. Here's Aries. What about the hired man sign? Well, what you're looking at in the picture, this Egyptian fellow standing in the door, is essentially Joseph's hired man. The person that's looking at him in the middle of the brothers, this is Benjamin. And there's a story in the book of Genesis about Joseph and his brothers. Benjamin is a major figure there. And in this story, Joseph's hired man is a major figure in this whole story having to do with Benjamin. For instance, Genesis 43, 16, and 17 says this. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Take these men to my home and slaughter an animal and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon." Then the man did as Joseph ordered, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. So if this is the hired man in Aries, it could actually be speaking about this hired man or steward of Joseph in this whole drama at which Benjamin is now really central in the story. So this could fit, but there are other explanations regarding this sign. Here's another explanation. There are native tribes who see this particular sign of Aries as a wolf, associated with a wolf. And we don't really know how far back that association goes with these native tribes. Some of them, we don't even know when they originated. But it could be that these native tribes have preserved the original meaning of the sign. Genesis 49 says Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, a very unambiguous identification. So even though this particular sign then is somewhat ambiguous, we're going to go here with this wolf association that we actually do have with the native tribes for Aries, because it's the simplest, most direct, and agrees with the scripture in a very direct way. So I'm accepting this, but I'm wanting to say that this particular sign does not have the certainty that we encountered with the others, which were just so absolutely certain. But I think the fact that native tribes do see Aries as a wolf is enough indication that this sign actually is the sign of Benjamin. So now we have Joseph and Benjamin in this second division. We have one tribe left in this division, which is Manasseh. Here's Manasseh, represented in the Mazzaroth/Zodiac by Pisces. And you can kind of see, just looking at it, what it actually is two fish tethered together. That's the sign of Pisces. It's kind of interesting, too, when we look at the breastplate stone. It's a field of blue with gold specks in it, a lot of gold specks. And you could very easily see that as fish swimming in the water or as stars in the sky. Both of these explanations certainly fitting in with Israel and more especially with Manasseh and with Ephraim. In Wikipedia, it explains this sign. It says this: Ptolemy described Alpha Piscium as the point where the cords joining the two fish are knotted together. Pisces is the Latin word for fish. It is one of the earliest zodiac signs on record, with the two fish appearing as far back as 2300 BC on an Egyptian coffin lid. Although they appear as a pair, the name of the sign in all languages originally referred to only one fish. The Greek myth on the origin of the sign of Pisces' original intent was afterwards corrupted both by poets and priests. Now, that particular quote, I think, is important to realize that even though these signs have been mostly preserved, the stories that go with the signs were changed, as it says here, corrupted by poets and priests. This is exactly what I'm trying to say about these signs. These signs originally came from the Creator, but the pagan mythology didn't come from the Creator. That's why we're not really referencing the pagan ideas and stories. That's irrelevant to what we're looking at. It's the signs we care about. And once again, looking at this sign of Pisces, it really fits. Now let me explain it to you. In Genesis chapter 48, it has the event where Jacob, Israel, met with his son Joseph, was reunited with him in Egypt, and found that his son Joseph had himself two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And he was going to bless these two sons. It explains to us how that happened. It says, Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. So notice what he did. He actually blessed these opposite to what would be expected under that custom. Normally, the firstborn would get the greater blessing, but by crossing his hands over, the greater blessing is being given now to Ephraim, with a lesser blessing, still a great blessing, given to Manasseh, who was actually the firstborn. But now the leading tribe of the two would be Ephraim. It says, he blessed Joseph and said, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac. So you see, because of this, these two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, although Joseph's sons, are named among the tribes of Israel as Israel's sons. And it goes on and says, let them swarm into a multitude in the midst of the earth. The Hebrew word here, where you see it saying swarm, literally means fish. Pisces, in the original language, which I believe was Greek, means fish. The word here in Genesis 48 that's translated swarm means fish. Pisces links two fish by a cord. That cord in the biblical story that links Ephraim with Manasseh is the blessing of Israel on these two, the brothers, Manasseh and Ephraim. And just like the two together always pictured just one fish, these two together picture Manasseh, who shares in this particular blessing with Ephraim. It's about fish. It's about two tethered together. It tells the story. So let us refer back now to the breastplate. The breastplate order of the remnant tribes of Israel in the second division, that is the Joseph-Ephraim division, includes the same three tribes that we find in the Mazzaroth. However, we did find one discrepancy, and that is that Benjamin and Manasseh were transposed with one another in the Mazzaroth. So the order is not exactly the same, even though all three tribes are listed. Well, if you have read the Bible very much and you read the lists of tribes and things like this, you find that they often vary as to position, depending on what the writer is doing, what the writer is saying. A lot of times we don't really know the reason, and that could be true here. It's just a variant, but it might be because of the two fish symbol. You see, by the two fish being tied together, representing Ephraim and Manasseh, if you put Benjamin in the middle, then that kind of links up all three of these tribes closely together. And you know, Joseph was really close with Benjamin. And so it could have to do with that or some other reason. I'm not saying that's exactly the reason, but it's inconsequential because what we find, we've gone through now 6 tribes, and all of the 6 tribes are clearly there, and all of the 6 tribes are with their correct divisions. So that, I think, is really quite remarkable. In part 3 of this video series, we're going to compare the remaining 2 divisions of the breastplate as we look at the Mazzaroth. And then after we look at all of these Mazzaroth signs, comparing them to the breastplate, we're going to be ready to look into the significance of our findings. And surely you must see that it's very significant that the tribes of Israel are actually represented in the signs of the Mazzaroth, created there by God before mankind was ever created. So join me for the next video, as this is truly something amazing to look at. And in the meantime, I do encourage you to visit the link you see here and view our Remnant Tribes of Israel seminar. I think you're going to find that very enlightening and fitting in very closely with all the things we're discussing. We'll give you all of the back information as to why these tribes are in this particular order. So this is the one and only nation written in the stars. We have discovered who that nation is written in the stars, namely the tribal nation of Israel. All of the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, they are written in the signs that the Creator put in the sky. That is highly profound and meaningful. Once we've looked at all of these signs and we see how they fit in with all of the tribes, then we're going to be in a position where we can start to consider the full significance of actually having this nation written into the stars. So I really want to invite you to join me for the rest of this series. And you can see this for certain if you sign up at tsiyon.net, because we will always have this video there, or this series of videos there. So if you miss it where you might have seen it originally, you can see it there. So please do sign up. Sign up is free. Thank you for being with us for this presentation, and we look forward to having you with us for part 3 of the one and only nation written in the stars.